It is for the values conferences.
Do that. That was trying to shuffle. Sorry. Just make sure that you don't grab the microphones by the necks, please.
All right, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, if everyone could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. First item on our agenda is the approval of last meeting's minutes. First, I'll ask for movement to put that under consideration. Dina, Tammy, any discussion? Any changes, edits? Nothing. All right. All in favor of approving the minutes? Say aye. Ayes have it. It's approved. Angelina, that moves to you in the superintendent's update.
Yep, I'm going to ask that we go to Mrs. Fanning, who is going to go through our presentation tonight. I just want to offer to everybody that's in the audience, the kids that are here, and to people that are listening online. You're going to start to see variations of this same presentation over and over and over for the next couple months as we start to refine the pieces and parts of the budget. What Ms. Fanning is going to outline today are going to be the pieces that the assumptions that we're making and kind of our starting baseline for the conversation that we're having in audit and finance. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Fanning.
I'm trying to get it to do. You know why it's not?
Click that.
This one? Yeah. It's like stuck.
Oh, it's,
It's really stuck. Like, I won't go to like view,
Oh.
like good view. Oh, there it is. Perfect.
we'll switch it.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, welcome everybody to the first budget presentation for the 2026-27 budget. I'm going to go into skip forward to some of the important parts. So our first draft of the budget. I'm going to present a number coming up in a few slides, but I want everyone to know that the first draft of the budget really includes a lot of estimates. We don't have a lot of solidified numbers at this point, so there's placeholders in there, there's estimates in there. For that first draft of the budget, most of those budget lines are just rolled over from the previous year. We kind of look at them, tweak them a little bit. Maybe we spent more on our legal expense last year, the last few years, so we know to increase that a little bit. So we kind of take a deeper dive at all of our budget codes, but most of them are generally just rolled over. The non-budgeted items from the current year are added into the budget for next year. As you may know, we have added a few things this year. There's been a few positions added to our budget. Those are mostly around the special education area. We did add a few aide positions. We also added a monitor position in our elementary school. Our part-time special education teacher that we budgeted for went to a full-time position. So there's definitely some positions that have been added. And of course, along with salaries are benefits for these people too. So there's a lot of preliminary estimates, as I said. Health and dental insurance. If you remember last year, those numbers were upwards about 15%. We're hoping this year, we've got word that they are not going to be as bad as they were for this current year. So I'm very hopeful. Right now, we just plugged in a number of 10%. We're going to get that preliminary number from our health insurance trust coming up probably the next few weeks. We'll have it for next meeting, that preliminary number, but we're really hopeful that it's going to be less than that 10%, but to be conservative at this point, we put in a 10% number. Our special education placements, we have had an increase in special education placements. We have a few kids that are awaiting those outside placements right now. So that is actually a number that has increased for this current budget. And we got to then roll into next year's budget. So we have more outside placements for those special ed kids. And as you may know, those do come with the hefty price tag. Those are upwards if you're in a residential placement of over $200,000. BOCES placements can be about $120,000. So they are pricey. And as you can tell from those numbers, having one kid enter, one kid leave can really swing the budget quite a bit. But we have to make sure that we budget for those kids. Debt service, we do have an increase in debt service, as you'll see coming up in a few slides. That's because of the debt from that current capital project that we are in the middle of right now. But the good news is that we will start to get building aid next year. So the building aid and the increase in taxes will offset some of that debt service increase that you'll see. BOCES services, including CTE, I don't have numbers from our BOCES right now for those pricing for next year. So those are some estimates. CTE numbers, we're hearing that there may be more interest from students that want to do CTE. So with that, that will come in with an increase from BOCES for kids to go to those CTE programs, VOTEC. Another one big piece, of course, benefits just in general. TRS is our teachers retirement system. So those are for our instructional folks for retirement. And then ERS is for our non-instructional folks, the non-teaching staff. That's their retirement system. Of course, we have to contribute to those, and that's a percentage of salaries. And unfortunately, the good news is TRS is going down a little bit, but ERS is going up. So that's not great news. Looking at CSEA, that's up in the air right now. So we put a placeholder in the budget for that. CSEA is currently in negotiation, so that's a placeholder in the budget right now. So when you see this number, again, please remember that this is really a preliminary number. We don't have a lot of definites right now. So looking at that budget to budget, you'll see it's almost, it's almost a $2.5 million increase, which is quite significant. I'm going to get into a little more detail. As you'll see, a big increase is on that benefit side. Again, health insurance is just super costly. We still have retirees that pay nothing for health insurance. So that is a big cost for the school district, a major cost. You'll see that number for that interfund transfers. That's where that debt service comes into play. That's in that number. And you'll see that that's our increase in debt right there, a little over $1 million. And then the other ones are really, you can see, basically it's kind of not going up much. General support, that's the thing, like the superintendent's office, the business office, O&M. You'll see that budget really isn't going up much, pretty much status quo based on this first draft. Instructional, that really takes into account those outside special ed placements that we were talking about, increase in salaries and those added positions. So that's that number going up right there. Transportation, really pretty much status quo, really just salary increases. That's not much, but you'll see, like I said, the bulk is really in those benefits and that debt service.
Can I just mention one thing?
Sure.
One item that we talked about in audit and finance is not only are health insurance costs going up, but actually as people in our own community change their plans, that has an impact as well. And one thing that Mrs. Fanning did today, we just had a quick look in our current employees without anybody new or anything. 9 of them have changed to a more expensive plan during the year. They got married or they had children or some combination thereof.
Yeah.
So you've got kind of 2 things working at the same time. As you know, a family plan is significantly more expensive. I think we had 2 people that aged off their parents' plan and got on their own plan for the first time. So little things like that add up too.
But just that those 9 changes add up to over $100,000. So you can see how that causes a really big swing in our budget. So the major items, again, that are really going to impact our budget, those salary increases, health insurance premiums, the non-budgeted items, the student needs, special education mainly, ERS, TRS, transportation, because of course we got to get our kids to school. We are hoping at this point, we currently have one run that is contracted out. We are hoping that we get an additional driver and we'll be able to bring that run back in. But as it is in this budget number right now, we're slated to still contract out a run. But we're hoping again that we can bring that in. Again, CTE and then the increase in debt. So these are really the main items that impact our budget every year. So looking at the requested budget items, during budget season, we always go to our building leaders and our department supervisors, and we ask them, if you could have anything, what would you like? What would help out your departments? What would help out your school building? So from the elementary school, the request was a full-time general education teacher to decrease class sizes, 0.25 phys ed teacher, 1 general education teaching assistant, 2 cafeteria monitors, and a half-time health office aide. In the middle school, high school, they're looking for additional AIS support, and that would be just giving 2 of our current teachers an extra period, 1 for each of them. So that wouldn't be hiring a new teacher, that'd just be giving them an extra period, which is tied to their salary cost. And then looking at the departments, again, this perfect world, not you know, none of these items are in the budget numbers that we're seeing right now. But in a perfect world, transportation would like an additional diesel bus. Our fleet is aging. It is expensive to take care of older buses. Parts are really expensive. If we send a bus out, that's really expensive. So if we have newer buses, obviously we don't need as many parts. We don't need to send them out, which is really costly. O&M would like the restoration of that cut custodial position from last year. And technology would like restoration of that cut BOCES help desk technician position that was cut for this current year, I should say.
I will share with the public the same thing I shared with the board during audit and finance. I don't think any of the things that are on this wish list are outrageous in any way. They're very modest asks, and our admin and leadership team have been really great about understanding the fiscal condition that the district is in.
So looking at revenue, tax cap, this again is a estimated number. We don't have a few of the numbers that are required to get an actual figure, but it's looking to be about 3.5% for the tax cap number. Looking at foundation aid, our preliminary run, it looks like an increase of about $300,000. We are going to see a big increase in building aid due to the current project. And I showed you a few slides ago that we do have a significant increase in debt service. So this building aid is going to help offset that increase in the debt service. And then interest revenue. Interest rates are predicted to drop. That has nothing to do with us, unfortunately. We have no control over that. We do put our money in high yield savings accounts that yield have done us quite well over the past few years when interest rates has been high. But those interest rates for those high yield bank accounts are tied to Fed rates. So if Fed rates go down, those numbers go down. We have been pretty reliant in our revenue side on that interest revenue. So if that drops, that's going to be pretty detrimental for our budget. So looking at the current budget gap as it stands right now, and again, I just want to reiterate another time that these are pretty preliminary numbers with not a lot of definite numbers in there for some of those big items like health insurance. We're looking at a gap of about $1.6 million. If we were to use $1 million between appropriated fund balance or appropriated reserves, that would bring our number down to $589,000. And for those of you who are here for the Bernie Donegan presentation from our fiscal advisor, Bernie Donegan's office last board meeting, you'll see that the outlook it could be scary. So we just have to really think about how we're going to close that gap, get to a number so that we can keep doing what we do here.
Stephanie, just to confirm for everyone, that number does not include any of the asks you covered on the previous slides.
Yeah, that number right now includes none of those asks from the departments or the buildings.
But it does pretty much substantially roll over what we currently have this year over into next year.
Yeah.
So
Everything that we have this year was rolled over. So these are kind of things we have to consider as we move forward. I'm not going to read all these. When we look at the current elementary enrollment, these are kind of just our teacher-student ratios that might be of interest. Let's go to this one. So looking at our fund balance as of the end of last year, you'll see that we have a healthy, I'm not going to say significant, definitely not. If you remember last year, I put together a presentation for everyone kind of showing that where we land for fund balance as a percentage of enrollment, percentage of our budget. And if you remember, we were really in like that bottom 15% for the school districts throughout the Capital District. I believe I had about 80, 90 districts on there, and we were bottom 15%. I'm going to put together updated numbers for that, but I don't think that's going to change, unfortunately. I think we're going to be right around that 15%, the bottom 15% for fund balance. So we definitely are not a district that's hoarding fund balance. We don't have a lot of fund balance, really. So when we look at our restricted fund balance, that's our reserves. You'll see that it's about $3.8 million, but I have a little note down there. So $1.4 million is in our capital reserve. So the capital reserve is used for our capital projects. We were able to use it in this current project that we're doing, and using the capital reserve, depending on the amount of the project, can either allow us to do a tax neutral project so that we don't raise taxes to our taxpayers to do all these upgrades that we need, or it can help offset that burden to the taxpayer. So in my opinion, I feel that capital reserve is extremely important because it's giving back to our taxpayers and taking that burden off of them, some of that burden. Signed fund balance, about $1.3 million. That's includes the amount that we appropriated for this year's budget to offset the gap, and also encumbrances from last year. And that number is, it was about $1 million that we appropriated, but then 300,000 seems like maybe a lot that we rolled over. But if you recall, we weren't able to get a bus in last year that we were supposed to get. So that was almost $200,000 alone that we were supposed to expense last year, and we had to roll over to the current year budget. And then our unassigned fund balance, and that's that number you probably hear about, like, got to stay within the 4%. We are within that 4% from that we have to keep in legally at about 1.2 million. So right now we're at about little over $6.3 million in our fund balance. So thank you. And does anyone have any questions or comments? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was pointed.
Just a question in regards to the fund balance being in the bottom 15%. Is that in like a dollar amount? Is that what you're comparing, or is it a percentage that you're comparing?
So
What our fund balance is to our budget?
I'm going to present that. I'm going to do an updated one for the new numbers from the end of last year. But I did it as like a percentage either of our budget or a percentage or like per enrollment.
Okay.
So both metrics, we were still about in the bottom 15% of fund balance for districts in this area, unfortunately. But I will put together an updated one that will show numbers that are more up to date. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. A couple updates that I want to share with everyone. Last month, I talked to you about 2 grants that we had applied for, and unfortunately, we weren't successful on those 2 grants. But I just share that to show that we're constantly looking for opportunities for money, big and small. And actually, tomorrow, I'll be working with a consultant on a new PE grant. I'm not even sure what that will give, but again, we just throw our hat in the ring to try to look for those opportunities, again, to supplement what program we're able to offer here. This one is going to be a little different that I come to the board with, but it's the tamarack tree that is right in front of our building. If you look to the right as you're facing the secondary school, you'll see a very, very sad looking tree. That is the tamarack tree. It is dying. But unfortunately, it was a memorial tree. So there's no question, it has to be replaced is probably the way that I'm going to say it. We're trying to get a hold of the family that we believe that tree was planted for. And I'm thinking in the spring, we could do a complete rededication in conjunction with the family. But I do want to share with you, Kevin has been begging me to kind of get permission. I will not give him permission yet. I want to be really respectful to those families. It's not the only tree that we're having trouble with, but I know for a fact that that's a big one. We'll work with our architects to make sure that the replacement tree is in the right spot for the right thing that can last over time. I think it's lasted for probably 30 something years. So it's been there for a while, but I did want to share, it's looking sadder and sadder and I hope it makes it through the winter. So just wanted to share that with you. Our committees have been busy as well. As I mentioned last month, our AI committee has met, our communication committee has had some conversations, and our athletic ad hoc committee has met. Communications I shared with, we are continuing to explore opportunities for just vehicles to better get information out. And I had shared with the communication subcommittee yesterday that we're exploring Parent Square, which many of you might have heard of. I don't actually have a cost yet, so it might be something that's absolutely cost prohibitive to us as a district. But Ms. Lanou, who came from Hoosick Valley, she used that and she thought it was really, really great. So we're in the process of looking up at those things. AI, I think people are we had to cancel a meeting this week, but we're going to be meeting early next month. Again, it's just, I think we're chasing our own tail. It's getting ahead of us, but we do have an interested group of faculty members that really want to do what's right for our school community. So we're on the lookout for that. And then with athletic ad hoc, we are currently working on a survey for our kids to see what they might need to explore and to get back engaged into sports if that's something that they've gotten away from, and just to learn a little bit more about what the kids need. Something else that came up over the years is this traffic in front of our building. And we worked with DOT, and I actually thought we got it over the line this year to actually get the area in front of the secondary school turned into a speed like a reduced school speed zone, but ultimately it got denied. So I've been working with the town of Brunswick to see if they could put up a your speed is one of those like flashing signs. And the town actually doesn't have one, but they were able to put us in contact with Rensselaer County, who is going to let us borrow it. However, they don't want to put it out during the winter, one, because it's solar and it needs light and there's not a lot of light. And they also know that the plows will kill it. So when the spring comes, they're going to drop that off and I'll work with Kyle, we'll do like a whole campaign about this is a school zone, this is what it looks like, hopefully that also transitions into on campus and how people drive on campus as well. And then lastly, we're in the process of developing our calendar for next year. We got the Questar calendar and we usually model ours against that. We got some feedback from our BTA partners about what that might look like. So I anticipate having a calendar for your adoption next month, just in case people ask, when's the spring break going to be? It's very, very close to coming to fruition. So with that, unfortunately, Miss Lanu caught the Tamarack flu, so she's not with us tonight. Do you have anything, Miss Norton?
I do. I was able to speak to Miss Lanu earlier, and there were a few things we wanted to mention. So next week is January Regents Week. We have a bunch of kids taking exams, either because they're trying to get a better score or they didn't pass it the first time. But we also offer all of our juniors the opportunity to take the ELA Regents. If they don't do well, then we can give them some AIS support. Excuse me. So we are looking forward to see how the scores come. Along with the Regents exam, we have a January Academy that we've been doing for a couple of years. We're going to do that again. Any students that need a little extra support, or perhaps are on the academic ineligibility list, are invited in. They've already been given letters to bring home. Lunch is provided, transportation is provided. They'll get some one-on-one support or small group support with teachers. Our counseling staff is putting on a session for organizational skills, goal setting, just some new things to try to help support the kids. We have Coffee with the Counselors coming up on January 27th. You can find that in the newsletter, Facebook, on the website. There is a request for RSVP by the 20th of January. And that is going to be in person in the LGI or live stream if people can't make it in. That's 8:15 in the morning. So that could be tough for some people. We have some fun activities coming up, even though it's Regents time coming up. Ms. Dankworth is doing her big public speaking wedding event tomorrow where the students come in and practice speeches. It's a fun event. Stephanie O'Connor, our 8th grade science teacher, has a reptile guy coming in again for our 8th grade students. So we have some fun things planned. And the most important endpoint of the year, graduation, will be outside this year. We'll be protecting the turf. And Miss Lanu will be sending out an official announcement tomorrow that will have all of the details.
I have a quick question about the Regents. So the kids who are taking the 11th grade ELA Regents, if they don't pass it now, they have the opportunity to take it in June, right?
They do.
Okay.
Yes.
And in August again, hopefully.
Yes.
they
Okay.
need it. Some take it too, again, just to improve
To
their
improve,
scores.
okay, I was gonna ask that too.
But I can say from the time that I've been here, our English scores have gone up when the kids, that's the only thing they're working on. I think the pressure is off in June, so it's been great. Thanks. And I have Mrs. Honorado, and then she also has a presentation, so whichever order you'd like to go in.
I'll keep my updates brief. I did want to take the opportunity, since it just happened this week, to let you all know that I was able to attend the state presentation that were held at BOCES, all BOCES satellite offices across New York State, of Portrait of a Graduate, but with a specific focus on grades pre-K through 5. That was just yesterday. I came away with some really good information. I think it might, spark some local conversations around what this means for us, and particularly what Portrait of a Graduate means for our youngest students and learners. For now, it seemed really, really high level. There aren't any roadmaps or blueprints for schools to follow, certainly. There's a lot of room for schools in our component districts in both these regions to kind of work together, maybe to put some ideas and some plans in place. But one big takeaway that I was encouraged by is, really emphasizing this message for our youngest learners, but I think too, it's safe to say maybe for everyone, pre-K through 12. This isn't intended to be a complete overhaul of what we're doing in schools in terms of curriculum and instruction. In some areas, especially for our littlest ones, it's just about seeing things differently. So for example, play, right, in pre-K and kindergarten. Maybe instead of, not that all of us look at it this way, but instead of seeing it as like free time or something fun to do, maybe focusing on that as a more purposeful activity that's linked to some of these skills that are ultimately gonna provide that foundation to build that full portrait of a graduate when they leave us in 12th grade. So more to come on that. It's kind of exciting, but again, I think some of the more technical requirement-based things that the state may or may not have schools do, might be coming further on down the road. But that's a big update from this week. And we're also looking ahead along with the middle school early next month to do our simulation for New York State testing. We do all computer-based state testing for grades 3 through 8 now. So that's just that winter time where all of our tested grades get a little time to practice on that platform. I'll be sending out a communication about that a little closer, but it's not an actual test. It's very low stakes. It's really just a practice and a network test.
So I'm gonna have you set up. We're gonna transition to Alina and I'll help you set up. So Alina?
This Saturday, actually, at Grafton, NHS is aiding in another holiday event, similar to back in October when there was like a small walk through the woods, some sort of candy event. I didn't go. I was too scared. I didn't go on the trail. I went to the event. Next week is exams, as mentioned. The students who are participating are very grateful for the fact that there's no school during those exams. Just to,
they were grateful for the exams.
oh, I wouldn't go that far. Yeah, as to not have to juggle school on top of the exams, January 31st is Big Red Day, a Big Red Day for basketball. It's going to be very eventful. Home wrestling match is to follow up last month's Tamarack Duels, which I heard went very well. Other than that, the beginning of the year has been a little slow, but also very smooth and peaceful.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. Alina is one of our CTE students. So CTE was a conversation that we had a lot in budget and finance. So I just thought maybe you could just take a minute or so just to talk to the board about your experience with CTE. And do you find it valuable as a Tamarack student?
Listen.
I am listening.
Absolutely find it valuable. I did not know what, honestly, last year, I was really struggling with what I was going to do. Like, who am I? Who am I going to be in the future? Honestly, I remember a few times I honestly cried about it. Like, I didn't know where I was going to go. I knew that I had my family to back me up and I had great teachers who could guide me. But it wasn't until that I got into the CTE program and this beginning of this month, actually, we started our clinicals. And I started to realize less of this is not a career for me. This is who I'm going to be. This is what I love because I went there. And it's different to imagine seeing yourself in this third person helping people and then actually being there. Honestly, it changed me. And I think it's going to be me for the rest of my life.
So obviously, you're having a good experience. What will you end up with? Obviously, you'll have a Tamarack High School diploma when you leave, but what other things will you end up with because you went to this program?
Because I went to this program, I will actually have the opportunity, if I need to and I want to go into the working field because I'll have a CNA license if I pass the test, which I'm very confident I will.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, Mrs. O.
Okay, hello again. I changed places. I'm going to switch this view here. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit in a more focused and organized way about elementary discipline. I titled this presentation Elementary Discipline because I'm the elementary principal. So that will kind of be a focus of some of the context in which we might talk about some policies and practices. However, a lot of what we're going to talk about is also applicable to just discipline in public schools at any age or grade. I also wanted to just kind of clarify that discipline is a really broad term. Discipline happens in the classroom, discipline happens on the bus, it happens in the hallways. The vast majority of our students, if discipline is implemented at the classroom level by a teacher or in the cafeteria by one of our monitors, that's really sufficient to address most daily behaviors with most of our student population. But in this presentation, we're going to go beyond that a little bit, and some of the focus is more going to be on that school level, maybe administrative conferred discipline, such as suspensions for more significant infractions. So just a little clarification there. Okay, so a little introduction into this topic. I want to speak about a little bit about maybe where we were previously a few years ago. I started back here in an administrative capacity in the 21-22 school year. We've always had, at that time we still have, we're required to have a student code of conduct in place. That's publicly available. It's in our board policies. It generally describes prohibited student conduct, how infractions are reported, what types of discipline may be conferred for various infractions, who can confer certain types of discipline. So for example, in the code of conduct, it'll reference what a teacher may do. A teacher certainly can't suspend a student from school, but it will clarify that a principal or a superintendent can do that. And the student code of conduct is pretty lengthy, but it really does kind of just describe things in general terms about how discipline works here. So by the 21-22 school year, it was just kind of generally observed that a collectively understood and consistently implemented process for student behavior and discipline needed to be a focus in the elementary school. That was due, I think, to a variety of factors. We had the COVID-19 pandemic. There have been changes to research-based practices for behavior and discipline. We had administrative turnover to a certain degree up to that point. So all these things, I think, kind of impacted what was happening or what wasn't happening with discipline at that time. So a little bit about where we are by 25-26, that's this school year. We now have a set of general behavior expectations and guidelines for teachers. That is part of our pause matrix, links to this bullet. A flow chart for decision-making for problem behavior was created. That's shared with teachers every year. A consistent means of reporting student behaviors was developed. That's like our referral form. We've now, this year, we're trying out an electronic version of that form. We've started to install tiered interventions for behavior in our MTSS, or a multi-tiered system of support for students, and information on behavior and discipline that's a little more specific to elementary issues is publicly posted and provided to parents annually, and that information is in our handbook. So some of the parents who have browsed our parent handbook, they might have noticed a major behavior, minor behavior chart. That's updated and in our handbook every year. Teachers also follow that to help differentiate what version of maybe, let's say, an aggressive behavior might be at the more minor level and is handled in the classroom versus a more major version of that behavior that's referred to an administrator for possible discipline. Okay, so where do we go from here? As with any system, it's time to look at the basic system we have in place for elementary discipline and determine where improvements can be made to our student discipline processes in the elementary school. And actually, back in the fall, we talked internally about setting up a committee. It's completely voluntary. I had a great response from folks in the elementary building who wanted to be a part of this work across a range of perspectives, to come together as a discipline committee to just take a look at kind of what we just talked about, where we were, where we are, where do we want to go. We met in November. I expect to meet again certainly this year, and we already have some action planning identified and some work in place. So I look forward to updating the board on that as we move forward as well. So some of the things that we discussed at that committee level, just to consider and kind of organize our work, you have to start somewhere, right? You can't tackle everything at once. We talked about, do we want to focus our efforts on improving practices and procedures that'll support both compliance with the policies that we're responsible for, while prioritizing student and staff safety, creating tiered approaches to discipline in a way that would further clarify the progressive nature of discipline. So a more concrete example of this that we were thinking about in that initial meeting with the committee was how the secondary school has a cord policy. And there are different levels of infractions and examples of specific discipline that might be expected for those different levels, with each level being kind of an increasing level of concern with the infraction. Improving any reporting and communication around disciplinary procedures and actions, or how we might work with or leverage other systems to reduce exclusionary discipline. That means like removals, suspensions, you're out of the classroom, you're out of the school, and improve equity in our practices. So that's really important. That'll come up on another slide. As schools, we're always responsible for making sure that whatever practice, system, procedure we have in place is equitable for everyone. We don't want any race or ethnicity to be receiving an excessive amount of discipline in comparison to others. We want to consider that students with disabilities aren't being disciplined at a rate that's really disproportionate to students without disabilities. So those are always things that we try to keep in mind and that ultimately are responsible for as a school.
Kelly, quick question about the
course.
committee. If parents either in the room or online are interested in trying to find ways to help out, is there any opportunity for parental involvement in the future?
I'm sure there will be. I have to be honest, it's just such a new thing that internally we just kind of wanted to get the discussion going and kind of organize our thoughts and our work around this a little bit, but certainly I'd be open to having parent input and engagement. Actually, there is an action plan that's drafted and being reviewed by the team, not just for like this year, maybe into next year. And one of the aspects that's highlighted is a step to further engage parents. So if we update, let's say, a policy that, what we present to parents might look a little different in terms of what's in, or in comparison to what's in the handbook right now, we might want a little feedback on that. So certainly engaging the PTSA for some feedback might be a step that we take even this year. But certainly as we get a little more organized and what we're looking to focus on takes a little more shape, we're happy to include parents or external partners, board members, whomever is willing to provide us with some input and feedback. And I want to clarify, the committee is very informal. It's not a required committee. It's not a board directed committee. We just kind of grassroots came together and we're trying to start to take a look at things. So on this slide, I wanted to kind of compare a little bit. When we're talking about discipline, you can't really have that conversation without acknowledging that we really need to have proactive and educational measures in place. Behavior management and intervention, that's a more proactive approach. Kids are here to learn. Part of what they're here to learn, especially our younger kids, is how to behave in certain settings and group settings. So if the only thing we're doing is discipline, we're just going to be on a hamster wheel that we're never going to get out of. You know, we have to take that approach to teach kids what's appropriate. That's where you have your classroom management strategies. Appropriate instructional planning, honestly, helps prevent a lot of problem behaviors. You know, if you have a really well-organized, appropriate lesson planned and instruction delivered in a way that, you know, is appropriately challenging for kids and they're engaged, that'll help get ahead of certain behaviors for most kids. Explicit instruction in appropriate behavior. For example, we might assume that a child comes into a classroom and when it's time to go from the desks to the rug, that they can move and know how to move appropriately from their desk to the rug in a group setting, not Spider-Man rolling or leapfrogging from their desk to the rug. Kids, believe it or not, need explicit instructions sometimes in what the teacher expects in terms of their movement during those transitions. So that's just an example of what explicit instruction and behavior might look like. Discrete corrections, I added the word discrete in there. Kids need just little corrections from time to time. They need frequent reminders if their behavior isn't something that's expected in the classroom, a reminder of what is expected. But more often than not, we try not to do that publicly. You know, it's more effective if the teacher is able, they're not always able, to just kind of quietly give that reminder at the student's desk or have a little conference with the student from time to time. Building positive relationships goes a long way in strengthening and sustaining positive behavior in students. Some scheduling considerations. And certainly there are students with disabilities that some of their behavior is a function of their disability, and some simple accommodations in the classroom they're entitled to and will help them function a little bit better. And then certainly on the discipline side, we have our consequences and our punishments. These are also very important to have in place. We certainly have these in place. One big thing we really have to keep in mind, though, in which consequences we confer and how we confer them, is that sometimes disciplinary consequences can actually reinforce a problem behavior. So an example of that is a student that reaches a level where he or she is suspended from school because of their behavior. That suspension for some students actually reinforces that problem behavior because the student wants nothing more than to be sent home from school. So, you know, just certain things that we have to keep in mind when we're conferring disciplinary consequences. There are policies around discipline. We have our code of conduct here locally in our district, but we're also required to follow, you know, practices that are in line with New York State education law. One key thing that is really important in my world is that if I'm conferring a suspension on a student, I cannot suspend a student for more than 5 consecutive days. So 5 days consecutively as a principal is the maximum length of suspension that I can confer. I can confer multiple suspensions that are 5 consecutive days, but I can't suspend a student for 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, 9 days, 10 days at once. Anything beyond that 5-day, what's often called a principal suspension, would require a fair hearing with the superintendent and a whole other process and procedure involved in those types of decisions. Another key policy that we're required to keep in mind and follow for discipline are regulations specific to students with disabilities. We'll get into that a little bit more, what a DSIP and an MDR is on a future slide. And generally, whenever we're conferring discipline, and certainly at this point, we're thinking more of those removal-based disciplines, right? You're removed from class, you're removed from the school. Our responsibility to ensure that that student receiving discipline still learns doesn't stop. We're still responsible for educating them. If they're out of the classroom, they still need access to the instruction that they're missing. If they have a long-term suspension that's more than 5 days, we have to find a way to make sure that students' education isn't interrupted. And that's not just for students with disabilities, that's for all students. We have to make sure we're documenting things appropriately and reporting things appropriately. That includes to parents. Parents have certain entitlements around notification with certain types of discipline. And again, equity in our practices and procedures. Okay, so some possible misconceptions that have come up around discipline, at least in the elementary school. So number one, misconception. A school can deny a student's entry or re-entry if they've already started school here, if they, the school, deem the student to be a chronic or significant behavior problem. So that is a misconception. The reality is all age eligible students who reside in this district are able to attend their local public school, period. We don't vet kids, you know, when we're screening kids for kindergarten entry, there really isn't a layer of that to kind of suss out whose behaviors might be too much to handle in school. Really, that screening is for the purpose of giving us information so we can group our classes appropriately. Anytime a student's removed for disciplinary reasons, we have to follow appropriate laws and policy around the length of a suspension that's conferred. Another misconception, a school can just suspend a student without notice, without explanation, no matter what the behavior is, if it's a really significant behavior. The reality is, discipline law requires due process. That includes appropriate notice of the issue to the parent and an opportunity for the student to be heard, especially for suspensions. One kind of, I wouldn't say exception, but one caveat to that is if a student's behavior we determine in that moment it poses a continued threat to the learning process or the safety of others, we can require the student to be immediately removed, but the parents still are entitled to appropriate written notice around that, and the length of suspension requirements still apply. Another misconception, some of you might be familiar with this term. If not, I'm happy to clarify it. The use of restorative practices means that there are no disciplinary consequences at all. So that means adding a practice, this is a really, really basic example, but a student turns a classroom upside down. Maybe they're 5, not okay. But I might require that student or the teacher to clean up the classroom before they can move on to the next opportunity, maybe with help, right? That could be a disciplinary consequence. There might be some other discipline that's involved in that as well. So districts may use these types of restorative and supportive interventions, but it doesn't eliminate or replace disciplinary consequences in general. Like the example, I gave, restorative practices are designed to be a reasonable response to behavior impaired with appropriate discipline. Okay, another misconception, discipline must be conferred the same way for all students in school for specific infractions, no matter the circumstances. If you hit someone, it doesn't matter if you're 5 or 10 or 16, a hit is a hit, and this is the punishment that you get for hitting someone. The reality is, in elementary schools, responses to behavior are typically designed to be instructional and corrective, not just punitive. This could include warnings, parent contact, a myriad of other strategies. Discipline is supposed to be age appropriate and progressive. So there are certain things that are just extreme and, a student may need to be removed. But a 5-year-old hitting someone in the arm is different than a 16-year-old hitting someone in the arm. So we have to kind of consider the context and what's age appropriate and developmentally appropriate in terms of our discipline for kids.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Do any of those laws or guidelines or policies change for a repeat offender? This is like a totally extreme example, but a kid shows up to school with a knife.
Mhm. That's different.
Okay.
Weapons, drugs, or serious bodily injury is different. And we will get into that a little bit.
So let's take away the extreme
Yeah.
example then. A repeat offender who,
Of like a serious,
yeah,
Yeah.
like, really disruptive to the
Mhm.
classroom, possibly harming the safety of another child because they're throwing things or
Yeah.
swinging their arms or
Mhm.
kicking. Do any of those guidelines or anything change for a repeat offender? Every time they come back in the classroom, that's the situation.
Things will change, and you've given a great segue into this slide. But in relation to that question, the policies and basic laws that I touch don't change. So if a principal conferring a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 day consecutive suspension is not going to change, even if a student is engaging in that behavior over and over and over again. But again, this is why, like suspensions, right, alone aren't going, or certain disciplinary consequences alone aren't going to change a behavior. And I'm looking at Miss Gallo, who's our new director of special education. We're going to get into some more issues and examples that might be specific to students with disabilities. So I wanted to acknowledge her here. She's going to keep me honest. If there's anything that needs to be added or clarified, I certainly welcome and invite her to jump in, because we often partner, or we will, you're very new, but the special ed director and I often partner on disciplinary issues for certain students. So some examples of like supplemental or alternative strategies. So I mentioned a number of times there with suspensions, there's only a certain number of suspensions I can confer. There are limits to what I can do there. But if it doesn't change a behavior, we still have a responsibility to put other things in place that are well within my authority to organize and confer, that might really do a better job at promoting safety and managing certain issues with the student, while we continually work on those proactive strategies and educational strategies to try to correct and improve the student's behavior. So these types of things might be an individual student safety or crisis plan, behavioral threat assessments. I've changed schedules around to promote kind of safety and preservation of the learning environment. Staffing additions and changes, student stay away agreements, access level changes. What I mean by that is like what a student can or can't access around the building or in the building or outside the building. Referrals to our student support team, which is a part of our MTSS system. Connections to the counseling center, maybe for immediate support or some short-term social emotional interventions to help get at more of the root of the issue with the student. So there are more, but these are just some of the examples of non-disciplinary things that, you know, I can put in place at any time, and we routinely put in place to try to manage some of these more significant issues. And these types of things prioritize safety, again, preserve the learning environment. These types of things involve parents directly and engage parents, and ultimately, prioritize safety while supporting the student as they learn the appropriate behavior, hopefully over time. Okay, so now we're getting into some specific issues for discipline with students with disabilities. I'll try not to put you to sleep. This is very technical. I'm trying to keep this digestible, but giving you enough information so you have a good handle on what policies are at play here. So students with disabilities under the IDEA, which is a federal level set of law and regulations, and the Part 200 and 201 of New York State regulations, are entitled to certain protections with regard to school discipline. And I'll hit on two key areas there. The first one is around removals. So when I will talk about a removal, that's generally when a student with a disability isn't participating in general education anymore. Being removed, they can't continue to receive the recommended services or participate with non-disabled peers to the extent that they would have in their placement. If those removals constitute a disciplinary change in placement or a DSIP, certain things have to kick into place around discipline for that child and other processes. And a disciplinary change in placement is defined in policy. It's a removal for more than 10 consecutive days, or a period of 10 consecutive days or less. So it could be 3 days here, 7 days there, and 1 day there. If there's a series of removals that constitute a pattern. So 10 days is the key thing to keep in mind with the disciplinary change in placement. Also, there's a requirement in certain cases to determine whether the student's conduct was a manifestation of the student's disability. So that basically means, is the student behaving in this way because of their disability? The behavior must be deemed an MDR by a review team if the conduct in question was caused by or had a substantial connection to the student's disability, or is a result of the school district's failure to implement their IEP. Manifestation review requirements are incredibly technical. This slide is what is posted on State Ed's website in the Office of Special Education Policy. I am not going to go through this entire slide, but this is basically what schools have to do when they're conducting a manifestation determination review. And a key things to remember, the orange section, if the team determines that, yes, this behavior was a manifestation of their disability, then certain things have to happen. The Committee on Special Education must conduct a functional behavioral assessment, implement a behavior intervention plan. These are all things that are defined in other sections of regulation. The student has to be returned immediately to the placement that they were removed from. So what that means in practice is I confer a 5-day suspension, and the circumstances around that suspension warrant a manifestation determination review. If the team determines it was a manifestation of the disability, that student might have only been out of school for 2 days by the time that determination was made. Right after that meeting, that next school day, they're right back in their current program and placement. The only exception to that is if the behavior involved weapons, drugs, or serious bodily injury. So that gets back to your first example with the knife.
And that doesn't necessarily just apply to kids with disabilities, that applies to every student. The drugs, weapons.
Oh, yeah. But you'll see for other students, and I do have like some scenarios I can run you through at the end, just really, basic, general examples. But for a student without a disability, this would not be a process that's followed. This is specific to students with disabilities. And certainly if the manifestation team determined that the behavior was happening because the district wasn't implementing something in the IEP, that has to be remedied in the child's IEP immediately. Okay, so if we have the stamina, I can take you through a few scenarios that might be helpful to kind of pull all of these together in a realistic situation. Just please understand these are completely hypothetical. The students that I'm talking about are not students in our school. The events I did not pull from an exact event that happened with a student, but it's kind of a combination of events that I've experienced in many schools, elementary schools experience, and procedures that would need to be followed based on those certain types of situations. So first we have Aaliyah. She's a 4th grade student with a disability. And this is a scenario where her behavior was determined to be a manifestation of her disability. So Aaliyah, in this pretend scenario, is eligible for special education under the disability category of autism spectrum disorder. For those of you that don't know this about special education, if a student's identified as eligible for special education, it's got to be under one of 13 disability categories. And autism spectrum disorder is one. So she has goals in her IEP related to social communication, emotional regulation, flexibility with changes in routine. She receives speech and language services, has classroom accommodations. She's very bright, and with her services in place, academically is on grade level. But during the fall, Aaliyah began experiencing increased difficulty during transitions in group activities. One day there was an unexpected schedule change in math due to a school assembly. When Aaliyah was asked to stop her independent work and transition to the carpet, she began yelling, using inappropriate language, and swung her arms at adults who approached her, knocking materials off a desk near another student. She overturned her desk. No one was injured, but the behavior significantly disrupted instruction. Aaliyah could not be redirected to another location at a class. The class was evacuated so they could continue instruction in another location. And Aaliyah threw objects at faculty and administration who remained with her to help de-escalate her. So in this case, the school issued a 5-day out of school suspension for aggressive behavior, disorderly conduct, swearing, everything that was described. And because Aaliyah had previously received a total of 6 days in suspension earlier in the school year for similar behavior, so this gets to your repeat offender kind of scenario. The 6 days wasn't consecutive, it was a total of 6 days. These removals formed a pattern and resulted in a disciplinary change in placement, a DSIP, under IDEA. So a manifestation determination review was conducted within the required timeline. The Committee on Special Education, which always includes parents, so Aaliyah's parents were there, reviewed all the information, looked at her IEP, everything that was required, and they determined that the behavior was a manifestation of her disability, because her disability affects her ability to cope with unexpected changes, regulate emotions, and communicate stress appropriately. The behaviors were consistent with the previously documented issues, and they did feel the IEP was implemented as written, but she does need additional behavior supports, which will need to be addressed. So she was returned to her placement the next school day. She was suspended for 5 days, but the next day after this meeting, she was returned to her classroom with the IEP in place. Her IEP team conducted a functional behavioral assessment, and her behavior intervention plan was revised to help address these behaviors in specific ways. Okay, so that's one example. Then we have Liam, who's a 2nd grade student. He does not have a disability, but he's suspected of having a disability, and his behavior was determined to be a manifestation. So I'm not going to read this one, but I think this one highlights that those manifestation determinations and disciplinary change in placement provisions apply even if a student is suspected of having a disability. And ultimately, Liam is a student who was identified and found eligible. This was a part of the process. So sometimes these things kind of retroactively apply. And then we have an example of a 3rd grader who is a student with a disability, but her behavior was determined not to be a manifestation of her disability. So Maya's a 3rd grader with a learning disability in reading and math. She doesn't have any documented behavioral, social, emotional, or executive functioning deficits. She's got an IEP, includes reading, math, and study skills goals, preferential seating, some testing accommodations. But over several months, Maya was suspended for 2 to 3 days at a time following a series of physical altercations with classmates during recess in the cafeteria. Those suspensions totaled 12 days, established a pattern of removal, manifestation determination team met, reviewed the IEP and all pertinent information, and they determined that behavior was not a manifestation of her disability. They found no direct relationship between her behavior and her area of disability and what the IEP focuses on. And they confirmed that her IEP was implemented accordingly. So that means she gets the same disciplinary action as any student without a disability would get. She's still entitled to her continuity of services. So she is a student with a disability. She's out of school for a specified period of time. She's still required, or she's still entitled to special education services. And she has a right to appeal, just like any parent of a student without a disability can, there's an appeal process for disciplinary suspensions. And even though this wasn't determined to be a manifestation of her disability, she is a student with a disability. So a functional behavioral assessment is still something that they might want to consider to determine if she needs a behavior intervention plan as a student with a disability. And then finally, we have Samantha. She's a 5th grade student. She doesn't have a disability. She initiated a fight with a student on the playground, resulting in the student needing medical attention for a black eye, split lip, and loose tooth. Multiple adults intervened swiftly, and Samantha began swearing at the intervening adults. She then ran away from intervening adults and had to be chased across the parking lot before being stopped by school personnel. When walking back across the parking lot, she bolted from the adults again and kicked a side mirror of a car, damaging it. She picked up a stick and threatened to hit the adults with it. She continued to use foul language, threatening statements, engaged in overt disrespect directed at school personnel until her parents arrived at the school. Samantha received, now that sounds pretty extreme, but that's an example of where I may, in a real situation, I have to consider other things, 5 days. That's the maximum, right, of what I can do. But for Samantha, a superintendent's hearing, a longer term suspension might be in consideration. And prior to this incident too, she'd already received suspensions for other things, which we take into account, right? Because discipline is progressive. So the school needs to provide written notice to the parents within 24 hours of the suspension decision. This might be an example where I would implement that immediate removal, because Samantha, to me, clearly poses a continuing threat to the learning environment and the safety of others. They're entitled to an informal conference with me, and she's still entitled to alternative instruction. So after that 5-day suspension, the district decided they're seeking a longer term suspension, so they have to hold a formal superintendent's hearing. Parents get due process rights provided to them for that, and that hearing has 2 parts. There's a guilt phase part where it's determined whether or not the student's guilty of that infraction or the allegations, and then there's a penalty phase where other things are considered, including the student's record, their age, to determine how long that longer term suspension goes. A long-term suspension, you could correct me on this, Dr. Millett, like typically 20 days. So 20 days, right, is what we're talking about. It's not forever. It's a suspension, not an expulsion. And that child is still entitled to an academic plan, some tutoring. We need to make sure they have the opportunity to keep learning and progressing in the general curriculum. There could be conditions for an early return that might involve the Board of Education, and the parents also are entitled to an appeal process for that.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do they still do like self-contained classrooms anymore? or
Yes.
no? So say someone like Aaliyah, like when you start missing, 11 days of class or whatnot, would you recommend, self-contained and like mainstream a little bit of a day? So, maybe a full day and a full day, full time in a classroom all day might be too much emotionally.
Yeah.
And that's where the stressors are coming out. So
My experience, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, when they have the manifestation determination, a lot of times those conversations come up naturally, and it could be an
Yes.
outcome that there's a concurrent CSE meeting that occurs. The manifestation cannot unilaterally change the child's placement, but there could be a subsequent CSE hearing where the committee would get together and say, the child needs a change in placement, which would be what.
Okay.
Did I?
Yeah, so, no, that's a great question.
A lot of times that is an outcome.
Mhm.
People don't want it to happen.
Okay. That's also why it's just a good idea to have these policies in place because it's forcing the team to get together and then think about alternative things that we've talked about. And again, it can't be unilateral. That's why we want to get everyone together to kind of talk about those things.
I didn't know.
No,
it was
that's
a
a
good
great question. And I specifically didn't get into different like continuum and program options for students with disabilities that could be a consideration for the CSE.
A long time since I've been
Yeah.
involved in it.
Oh, you're a pro, you're a pro. But because that really doesn't have anything to do with discipline, right? Like those are programming decisions around what's best for students.
Right.
Right, and it's determined by a committee on special education. However, discipline is data, right? And if the data is showing that maybe the student's behavior is related to their disability and their current program, which is essentially their IEP, isn't configured in a way that's working for them,
Right.
right, that it's like that can create an opportunity for the CSE to come back together and consider those other programming options. Yeah, that's a great question.
Kelly, you had, oh, sorry. You go.
How is the, if there's the determination of a suspicion of disability, how is that determined?
So basically and I know I didn't take you through Liam specifically.
I'm just curious because that jumps out at me. It's like, how does that happen?
Right, so in a situation like this, there's already been documented instances of, if it's in the context of behavior, it could certainly be academics, but the child is not performing, right, where we would expect them to be. It occurs over time. We're trying other interventions behaviorally or academically. They're not responding, and we're starting to suspect that maybe the child's not performing because of an underlying disability, and we might be talking about requesting a referral as a school. We've engaged the parent around these concerns, but the key is, it's for Liam's case, students like this is already something we're noticing, documenting, tracking. There's a history there. It's not that, oh, the child has a really bad day and makes a really big mistake and gets in big trouble. And, well, maybe there's a disability there. This is something where if we're suspecting a child having a disability means that's already been tracked and documented.
Sometimes the testing is occurring. We just haven't had the
Yep.
committee come together to make a determination. So that often is
Yeah.
the case. Thank you.
You had mentioned the word expulsion.
Mm-hmm.
Still a thing that happens, like, are there grounds for it? I didn't.
I'm aware of. I mean, it's based on my understanding of laws and policies, that's really not a thing. And if there's some type of student that doesn't have a disability and they're transferred elsewhere, it's really not a true expulsion, especially if they're compulsory age. So I didn't mention that, but a lot of these policies really apply to, locally they apply to all students who go to our school. But when we're looking at removals and things like that, once you're over 16, you're past compulsory age, and there are some maybe differences in terms of like what you're entitled to and things like that.
Yeah, we are still obligated to provide them an education. Depending on their needs, it might look different.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. Sure.
So before we transition, I just want to thank you, Mrs. Honorado. I want to thank Mrs. Fanning for the presentation earlier. I know there are a lot, but I think that's really important information for you to have as you navigate through some of our situations that we have here in a public school of over 1,000 kids.
Angelina, for parents looking to download and review this, is this something that will be available online?
I can attach this to our board documents, yep.
Thank you.
Hey, Ryan, I just want to say that was a really great demonstration of the depth of knowledge of our staff and of Mrs. Honorado. So I just really appreciate the presentation. I learned a lot. I think everybody else here did too.
Yeah, excellent. I think there was applause, so. All right, that takes us to Angelina's. Did you have one more agenda item on?
We can talk about this in audit and finance, but I do want to draw your attention to two quick things. I mentioned this in audit and finance. As we're looking forward to the budget, the Rensselaer County Sheriff's Department is looking to see our interest in the SRO returning next year. And I just want to be really clear, I'm using a quote here. If we, as a district, select a 2-year contract, they can extend the current rate. If we go with 2 one-year agreements, the amount will be higher. They didn't say what that amount would be higher, but I think they're looking for a little bit of guidance. I don't know if the board is prepared at this point to have that conversation. I don't know if you want to talk about it in audit and finance, the committee report, but I did want to share that and have that out publicly because I know that's of great public interest.
Yeah, I will say getting the 1-year agreement last year was hard to get at that rate. So I think we knew this was coming. I'm actually surprised we were even given the option of another 1 or 2-year rate. So
They wanted to work with us. They see this as a partnership and I very much appreciate that. Kyle's done a really great job for us. But I just wanted to share that with everybody.
all right. That takes us to section 5, board and discussion reports. We have a couple things to cover today. First, audit and finance. You all saw Stephanie's update. Obviously, the SRO is another consideration. I do want to draw attention to item 9.1 later on in the agenda because we want to have some discussion about it now. I think one thing that is probably abundantly clear to everyone is, district finances are challenging. It is not an enjoyable experience to see a $1.5 million number up there and trying to figure out how to close it. So obviously tough conversations ahead. Something that we had discussed a little bit over email, which is one of the reasons why we want to make sure we have it in a public setting, is around Board of Education expenses. So there are, just to be clear, we're not paid, but there are some things, never mind. There are some things that do incur costs. Really, two of the main areas are, we do have an annual retreat. We also are members of the New York State School Board Association, which gives us most of the policies we use. We don't have to hire a policy writer. It's a tremendous resource, et cetera. And they offer other things. So there's also, for instance, an annual meeting. There are a number of very helpful conferences and seminars, but some of those incur costs. So there is a conference we sometimes send board members to travel to, and that incurs expenses around travel, et cetera. So what we were setting forth in 9.1 later on was a proposal to essentially remove any Board of Education expenses that weren't absolutely required mandatory. The reason for that is we do think it's important for the board to set an example to everyone about making sure that we are making those commitments. However, this is not a unanimous decision either, so we want to make sure we open up the floor for discussion. That's kind of how it got on the agenda, and really invite the rest of the board to offer their opinions, because it's certainly an issue that has many views on both sides. I'll probably hand over to John and Zach as a starting point.
Before we take the time to discuss it, I just want to make a motion that we shelve this until the Audit and Finance Committee has had time to actually discuss this particular resolution. So there's my motion put forward. I don't know the proper protocol here, so I'm assuming this is an appropriate time to do that.
Actually, I think I have to give you the floor to make the motion, which I can do.
Okay.
So all in favor of,
You need a second.
what's that?
You need a second for that,
Yeah, just a second.
I think, and then do your vote.
All right.
So what is your?
So my motion is to shelve Resolution 9.1 until the Audit and Finance Committee is met again, which is in 2 weeks. So let's shelve it until the next board meeting.
So speak on it today and then vote on it after the next audit and finance? Is that-
Or perhaps not speak on it at all.
Tabling it until the next meeting.
Understand? Yeah.
So he's putting it on the table, somebody would need to second that, and then we would vote on, are we tabling it or are we just taking care of it tonight?
So he would need a second in order for us to put that up for a vote.
Okay, I'll
John,
say.
okay, yeah, that's perfect. All right, so we'll start with discussion, because we can't have discussion first before we make the decision to table it. So if you want to have discussion now, I think that's
Sure.
more than fine.
I was trying to save some time of diving into it this evening because I think our committee should go into this. I think I'm understanding after our last meeting, just before this, a little bit more what's involved in this. Still, I'm not really prepared to give up on education expenses for the Board of Education. I think it's important. That's just where I think we need to take this in the bigger context of the budget rather than just scratch one thing right now, which maybe isn't even significant in the grand scheme of the budget. But I understand there's very limited room in our budget to cut anything.
I would agree with you in that education for the board, education for anybody is important. It's why our teachers have continuing education. Our administrators do, everybody on our staff has opportunities to educate themselves in their roles. My personal feeling on it is that our budget is tight. Our budget has been tight for several years. And when we look at it as a whole, it looks like a minuscule amount of money in relationship to the budget as a whole. It looks like a minuscule amount of money in comparison to some of the other cuts that we've made. But we struggled with this during budget season last year, that it takes 5 minuscule things to add up to half of a TA's salary. So every minuscule thing counts eventually. It all counts in the total number. So if we just pushed off everything that we're like, that's not really going to make a significant dent in our budget change, then we wouldn't really get any budget change. We'd be constantly spinning our wheels other than our major expenses, which are things we cannot cut. As far as getting education for the board, there are several ways that the board can be educated without incurring excessive expenses. So just to kind of call a spade, the specific expenses that we were referring to were travel and meal and lodging expenses in relationship to a conference. Many of those conference documents and those conference talks are available virtually or after the conference is completed, available online. We also have the option to minimize the number of people who are attending those conferences and then utilize our resource of ourselves as a board in bringing back that information and sharing information with each other. I took some time when we were talking about this to say, okay, well, what really is available? And at no expense, I came up with 8 different events that are available. 2 are in person, 6 are online for board education, and the cost is 0. So if we're we're talking in budget and audit and finance, and we're saying, listen, we need our athletic director to come back and squeeze his budget as tight as he can. I think Ryan made a good point. It's on us to set that same example and squeeze our budget. I don't think anyone's saying cut education for the board. We're saying cut the expenses that come along with that and be more creative in finding ways that we can get that education without the price tag that comes along with it. So for example, I know you guys went to the pre-law conference last year. You found a lot of value in that. I think just you went, John. You found a lot of value in that. That, I'm sure, was a valuable piece of education. We have our annual retreat. Several years ago, we included a legal person in that retreat because we felt like it was important to get that legal information, that legal guidance, which came at a far significant less cost than what those conference expenses added up to. So it's not cutting it, it's being more creative in how we obtain our education. It's cutting the expense that comes along with it. And there's numerous opportunities for us to do that. And I just think it's irresponsible for us not to do that when we are faced with cutting things that directly impact kids. Does our education matter in the whole picture? Absolutely it does. It trickles down to kids. But when I'm faced with the decision of these 6 kids have the opportunity to play this sport, or these 2 board members can attend a conference, my money is going to the children directly every single time. And I strongly feel that directly impacting our students is my number 1 priority when it comes to what our finances look like.
Anybody else has anything?
Yeah. Yeah, so, I want to certainly thank everybody for taking some time to hear me out on this. I certainly, I certainly hear what you're saying. But I think, we all come from different perspectives. We all have different experiences. And I know that this is a school. This is not a for-profit business. But I've run two fairly successful with ownership groups. It's never been my money, but I've run two very large-scale businesses. And one of the things that it comes back to is how are the best ways to spend our money? What are the best ways to invest in us? So, I kind of prepared some items that I wanted to just kind of read out to everyone. And some of this is based on my experience of going to this year's conference. So I wanted to speak on that. And, and I also wanted to take a minute, and one of the things you're going to hear me speak about is that, a lot of people might think, going to New York City for a few days is this great experience. And I want to make sure that the community as a whole understands that, that this is, in my opinion, money well spent. It's not a frill. It's not something that's great. There's sacrifices that are made for this. So, I'll go ahead and I'll just kind of, read what I prepared for this. So I want to thank everyone for allowing me a few minutes to discuss something I'm very passionate about. I believe the pursuit of professional development and embracing the idea of being a lifelong learner is paramount to our success as a society. So I'd like to take a few moments to share my experience with you and speak to why I believe PD is so important to all of us. And I'll also get into that it's not just about the sessions, it's about the being a part of the NYSSBA community. So this past October, I had the opportunity to attend the New York State School Board's convention. Convention fell on one of the busiest weekends of the year for my hotel. I chose to sacrifice the needs of my career because I believed attending the convention would better help serve the needs of my community. To fully immerse yourself in subject matter over an intense 3-day period is a great way to obtain and retain important information, as well as making connections with fellow board members from across the state. With that in mind, I made the sacrifice and I used personal time to do it. That same week, there was a gala. At this gala were local, here in Troy. At this gala were local business leaders and other influential members of the community. I went to this gala last year. Expensive champagne, fine food. I passed on it this year because that's how important this was to me, because I really believe this is what was best for the community to be there. So, and in my personal life, it was 3 days away from my family. To know me is to know I live for my job and my family. I do very little for myself personally. So losing 3 days with my family and a very high volume weekend at my hotel was a true sacrifice I made because I believed attending the NYSSBA convention and showing engagement with the NYSSBA community was that important to my role as a board member. So to this point, when it was suggested that should a BOE member want to attend the convention in 2026, maybe we could pay our own way, I should have just said, great, good excuse to not have to go. Can't afford to pay my own way for this convention. I stretch myself thin to make sure I do as much as possible for my family. I do very little for myself, so there's not a lot of money left over to go to the convention, because if there was, I would. That's how valuable I found it. So this wasn't about the frills or anything along those lines. I missed work, I missed opportunity, I missed time with my kids. So this really was just a service to the community. Attending this convention, it's not a frill, it's a service to the community. And while I learned a lot, and I would recommend every board member to attend it, it brought me no joy. Being with my family is what brings me joy. And I left them for 3 days because I believed that it was the right thing to do for my community. One of the key areas of importance of the conference was being part of the NYSSBA community. This was not just about 3 days of learning. It was about making connections with other school board members, with superintendents from across the state. And being involved in the NYSSBA community is key to being a successful board, in my opinion. I got to meet different superintendents, and we got to meet board members, particularly from our BOCES. There was a specific breakout on AI. where it was just our Questar, and I got to meet a bunch of different board members and a bunch of different superintendents, which I thought was really helpful. So with that, our mission is to develop a love of learning and community in our kids so they will become lifelong learners. And shouldn't we as a board practice this and lead by example, showing our kids that there's always something new to learn? And to briefly address the point of attending meetings virtually, and I just feel very strongly about this, I think coming out of COVID, it was crystal clear that virtual learning does not work. If it did, we would shut buildings down, sell off all our assets, and really save the taxpayers some money. We aren't doing that because virtual learning does not work. A great example is one of the things that was discussed at the convention was it's not just us. Across the state, the COVID cohort of very young children are struggling mightily because virtual learning, it just doesn't work. And I feel the same way about colleges. I know that there's a lot more online learning that takes place at colleges, but even there, if online learning was so good and virtual learning was so good, they would shut the buildings down and they just print even more money than they print now. So I also want to just take a moment to say I'm worried that there's a connotation that my passion for this correlates with my personal desire to attend. It does not. I sincerely believe our district needs to be represented and show active participation in the NYSBA community, even if I'm not the one to do it. So with all that in mind, I still encourage everyone else to attend, but I will not be attending in 2026, regardless of how we vote. And, then just to kind of talk about, over the past 10 years, I've run two businesses. One of those businesses was penny wise and pound foolish, and it struggled. The second invests in people, properties, and community. I'll give you a guess which one is more successful. So the trade-off, I think, would hurt our district. To cut $5,000 out of a $30 million budget, 0.0186% is, to me, penny wise and pound foolish. So I urge you to think about the big picture here. Finally, the last thing I'll do is I will ask Dr. Maloney, as an extremely well-respected educational leader, would you recommend board members continue to attend this convention? In your opinion, is it money well spent? And I'm not looking to you to put you in a tough spot of pitting one board member against another. I certainly don't expect you to advise anyone on how to vote or what to vote on this policy. I would just like you, as someone who has been a part of this for so many years, to speak on the value you might see in it. And with that, I'll leave it to the expert. And I genuinely appreciate everyone letting me speak on this, and just kind of hearing my perspective and what I have to say.
And Angela, just to say something quickly.
Sure.
Good governance, good citizenship is having discussions like this, right? So you do have different views. This is part of policymaking. This is why successful government encourages discussion. So just you're hearing two different sides, and that's a healthy conversation. So I just want to, it may sound as a disagreement. I prefer to think of it as a conversation. But with that, I'll
Yes,
hand it to-
and just to be clear, I respect everyone that sits here. We all volunteer our time, and whichever way the board goes, I will fully support. I want to make sure that just because, to Ryan's point, just because there's a disagreement on this, it doesn't mean that we can't work together and govern together.
Could I ask a quick question, two quick questions? Do you think there is any way for you to become involved as a NYSBA member without attending that conference? Genuinely. That's not a trick question.
Well, so to go back to the point I made, we're all very busy individuals. I work 60 to 70 hours a week. So for me, the way I was able to be so involved with that NYSBA conference was because I removed myself completely from everything. And I had 3 very intense days of professional development and relationship building and meeting people. So I don't know that I could, because on a daily basis, I work 6 to 7 days a week. And if I'm here in this area, my phone is ringing, things are going off, I need to be at my business. It's where I need to be. So the reason that it worked so well for me was because it was an intense 3 days out of this area, where I was just really laser focused on nothing else but NYSBA.
So, for example, if Ryan was able to attend, there's a lobbying day coming up shortly. If Ryan was able to attend that event and he was able to establish a relationship as a NYSBA member,
Is that sufficient as far as developing those relationships? As far as I'm thinking in terms of education, I could go to an event and I can bring the education back to you. If you're not available because you work 70 hours a week, what if Ryan is available to help to establish those relationships?
You know, I think maybe Zach could speak on this better, because as someone else who's attended the convention, I think it's more, I can't say really. I think for people that have attended the convention, it's easier to speak on than to just, scenarios of what ifs.
Well, I'll give you my other question too. And my other question is, what from that convention, outside of your own knowledge and education, came back that directly was implemented here? Did we implement any change from the education that was obtained from that meeting? And again, this is not attacking you. I'm genuinely curious if our board, our school district made any kind of changes, changed policies, implemented new procedures, anything that impacted our students directly, or if any of that networking impacted our students directly in any way.
Can I respond?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I think there's a couple questions here on the table that I want to respond to, but just to handle that one, first off, it's a really good question. And 2 months ago, we attended this event. Has in the past 2 months, the information that we learned there been able to benefit the board directly? I think that's a tough one to say yes to. I mean, I think the way you pose that question is really hard to say yes. I think we'd have to go back and actually look at previous years. So I just want to ask the board, how many people have attended the statewide conference for NISBA at the table here?
It's usually, in the past, it's always been Jack Early, it's been the president, the vice president that have represented. It's never been.
I have
So,
personally reviewed
I-
the online documentation of the previous conferences. So I've at least sat through the presentations and
good.
looked at them online.
That's great. And Jack was the president for how many years? It's your dad.
And just really, Angelina, but everyone was always invited to go, right? I mean, it was never just the president.
Yeah, that's been our history.
Everybody's invited to go.
But I'm just thinking, Jack was a very valuable member of this board for a long time and obviously predates me there. And yet he chose to make sure he attended every year. I don't think it was just for the champagne. I think he was actually learning things and bringing it back to the board. But I do think we should actually think about and maybe talk to him to get some information. Oh, I thought that's what you just said. I apologize.
In previous years.
There was years, depending on there was years that they opted not to go when budget was tight.
We are in a completely different budget scenario than we were even like 2 years ago when I got on the board. And I got on the board during COVID. So
When budget was tight.
budget was tight and it was bad. And last year that our budget failed, that is,
The new scenario.
that's a new scenario, that's a huge, I just don't think that we said to the public, hey, we're going over our tax cap. And by the way, there's a line item in here that's gonna,
$30,000 for,
$30,000, $10,000 that we're gonna spend on the board member going away. I understand that. We think it's valuable, you think it's valuable. We're here to educate the kids, not us. If
I
you want to, if
disagree.
you want to get your professional development, then then do it on your
The
own.
opportunities
You
exist.
can use
They
it
do.
probably as a tax write-off.
Okay.
You
Hold
don't
on,
pay for it.
please.
There's a
Right,
zero
there
dollars.
are $0. To say that to the public, go over the tax cap, have our budget fail, and then come back this year. I mean, we negotiated with teachers. Our teachers were very, very generous with their increases this year. We're in negotiations right now with CSEA and the health insurance and everything else. And there are people in this room that haven't taken increases to secure our budget and our main goal of educating our students. It doesn't matter. I don't care if it's $1 and I don't care how valuable it is. As a board member, I cannot consciously ever vote to put money in me, invest money in me over a student, a teacher, or a staff. I'm sorry, it's not ever gonna happen.
So just a couple points of clarification, because I just want to make sure we're orderly here. One is in terms of budget, the line item, is higher, but actual expenses between the conference and everything else, about $7,000 is what we spent last year, and a little bit less than for that for what we've spent so far. The retreat that we hold itself is about $800. There's also different things like the NYSBA membership, which, as I mentioned, carries with it the policies that we gain. For everyone's education, there's an annual meeting that's held. You can attend it virtually. I serve as the voting member. John is my alternate. It is done virtually. To support John's point, it is a 7-hour Zoom call. I would advise no one to sit through a 7-hour Zoom call. It was awful. That's not a point to say that virtual learning can't work, but 7 hours is not okay. But I do just want to remind folks that what Zach's motion here was to table 9.1 and continue the discussion of future audit and finance committee. Just calling that out to fellow board members that is still an option. Given 8:40, we can continue. I'm not the decider, just sharing with you all.
Can we just have, because I had asked Angelina a question, so can we just have her wrap up
Yes.
first?
Yeah, that's correct.
I hope I remember the question, but I think what you asked me is, do I find that valuable? I think I would be irresponsible as an educator if I didn't say professional development was valuable. That being said, I think we have to meet people where they are, so I appreciate the conversation and the honesty and transparency that everybody is having.
Can I just weigh in briefly? I don't think anyone is debating the value of education. It's what we do. It's why we're all here. I think what we're looking at is there are alternatives, which Jenna eloquently pointed out. There are a lot of alternatives for us to be educated. And I think the other thing that you mentioned, which was really important, is we should be sharing that information with each other. Because if one person goes, that's obviously going to be a value to all of us. So we should probably implement something where we set aside some time to share information if we do attend something, however, whatever form that may be. But I don't think anyone's debating the value of education. And I think it's important to understand that. We all want to be educated. We all want to do the best job we can. But if there are ways to do that, and maybe, save some line items on the budget and give it to where it needs to be, we should be looking at that.
I just wanted to say, John did come back and did give us a summary of his experience and what he learned, so.
Yep.
And I was not able to do that. I apologize because I was sick in December at the meeting for that. I'd be happy to give a summary of that. And I did with the previous event I attended. I do want to point out, and this is actually one of my fears here, is I've not heard anybody else on the board present to the board anything about their own education about being a board member. So my concern about it is not that, we're actually voting down education. I get that that's a look. The real concern here is we're not going to do anything. We're going to take away this line item. We're going to all say, okay, we're going to do the best we can for the district, and then we're never going to do it again. So I think, Dina, I really appreciate what you're saying, and I think we need to all resolve to do something different. And I'm okay with that, and I can accept that. But doing nothing, which is what has exactly been presented here, is zero out the budget with no alternatives, no discussion of anything else, not reducing the budget, just zeroing it out. And I was surprised that this single item is the only thing that came up. So what I'll ask is, as an alternative, what else could we do? But I think that's a good discussion to continue with the Audit and Finance Committee so we can dig into it a little bit more, or make another committee to talk about that.
If you go to NYSBA's website, I don't remember the exact clicks, but there is like events, upcoming events, and they're all there, spelled out, every education. I think it's under board education, actually, is the tab it's under.
Trainings.
Yeah, so there's ones you can log in and you can do online at your own pace, not necessarily sitting for 7 hours.
It's not a good idea.
You can get onto last year's and you can break it down by like sessions. It doesn't have to be a 7-8 hour straight when it's live. I know it has to be what it has to be. But it lists all of the events that are available, whether they're in person or they are online, what is available. So I don't know that anybody was proposing zeroing it out and doing nothing. I mean, I personally was proposing zeroing it out and taking advantage of the cost effective free opportunities, because there's plenty. BOCES actually has some opportunities. I was looking on their website as well. They're maybe not specifically like how to be a board member, but they are things that we talk about and we engage in, like policies, the portrait of a graduate. There's information there too, also in person and online. So those opportunities exist at zero cost.
And one thing that's really important for everyone to remember and recognize is one of those things that cannot be cut is state mandated new board member training, which includes fiduciary responsibility, policy requirements, the relationship we have with our employee, Angelina, covers all that. It is also very long, and I think we pay for either virtual or
You can do
online with a person. There's a number of different options. Yeah. So that we have to, we can't zero that out because that is a state mandate. So that's an example of something that we have to continue doing. And you can revisit those materials if you need a refresher on things. But again, I'm gonna, just for sake of time, go back to the original motion that Zach had made to table 9.1. And if everyone's okay with bringing that to a vote, I think we'd be good to proceed. Okay. So all in favor of tabling 9.1 until the next Audit and Finance Committee meeting to further discuss? All in favor? All right, John, Zach, and Danielle, did you have your hand up? Okay. All opposed? All right, Tammy, Jenna, myself, Kevin. Dina, are you abstaining?
Oh, I thought you voted.
I
at the-
did, I voted, I thought, I actually think, discussing it further is
We're
probably
split.
necessary.
So 4-4. I don't know.
I'm not sure. I gotta be honest with you.
All right, who's my Robert's Rules expert out there?
Okay, I'm sorry, so what is the option, is to vote
So you
tonight?
can, yeah, so if you table 9.1, that would defer conversation to the next Audit and Finance Committee, at which point we could bring back that resolution for consideration and then vote on it then. If you voted against tabling it, it would put 9.1 on the table for vote today, and we could either vote up or down on that.
Is there specific information that you feel like you need time to gather before we talk about it again in 2 weeks? Is that?
I would like to modify the resolution, perhaps at Audit and Finance, in order to accommodate the request that maybe we don't zero it out. Maybe we need to modify that and not just take it away completely. It sounds like there is some information we need. Additionally, before the next meeting, maybe we just want different language to say our board resolves to continue to value education and will resolve to attend X number of events. I think that just needs some hashing out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can put a resolves to attend X number of events. We're volunteers. We're not gonna be mandated to attend events.
We could resolve to do it.
Okay, so
All right,
the specific information you're looking to get between now and then is what?
We have some additional expenses that Ryan brought up, so it sounds like we can't actually zero out this line item in the budget. We should actually get a handle on what we are gonna have for that, because if we say here, we're gonna zero it out, then we're not gonna do that.
Yeah, and just to, well, correct. So the resolution does read, except where there are mandated expenses. But I think we can certainly revise that language even further as necessary. So I don't know what the process here is. I apologize. Since
I
we
mean,
were
I can-
a hung vote,
with
I might
that
ask us vote again.
information, I can.
The vote is hung, it's defeated. In Robert's Rules of Order.
Thank you, Roberts.
That's what we need to know.
The motion is defeated. So
Okay.
You have defeated yourself right now, so the motion fails.
Thank you. All right, so the motion does fail. If Janine
I
was
mean, I
here,
think
we'd have a
if the
different vote.
language already says, except for where there's mandated expenses.
We can cover that when we get there. As a reminder, we can,
So do you want to revote? Can we revote?
no.
You can
can
now
do this.
vote on that resolution when you get there. So
Okay.
the resolution was just table it. Now the resolution's still on there and you can vote any way
The
you want.
motion table was defeated. We will still have the discussion of 9.1 with the language, which I believe we can modify during discussion on 9.1 and then approve it with those changes to the language.
Yes.
Okay.
Or vote no and.
Or
come
vote
back.
no and just,
Okay.
So we can still vote on it tonight then?
yes. I'm sure the audience is very interested in what happens. We are on committee and liaison updates. So we're just whipping our way through the agenda. I know there was a PTSA meeting on Tuesday. Zach and I serve as delegates, representatives. Zach, I was not there, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, quick notes. Lori Lewis is here, president of the PTSA. So if you want to add something, please do, but we'll keep it brief. There were events discussed with respect to election night. Me as a representative of the board expressed our thanks for all of the support last year from the PTSA, and also a desire to communicate earlier about the election process with PTSA to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we can tie events together and support together between the board and the PTSA. There are some great events that were discussed, and let's see, art show, scavenger hunt, food truck, and party. So there's a lot of possibilities. I just want to make sure I get the highlights here. And a reiteration that all these events support the school, but it also supports the community support for what we're doing as a school and for the budget vote. So the PTSA is putting a lot of funding and a lot of time into these events, and I think we should recognize that as a board. It takes a lot of effort to do that, but it works. And I think we all saw it work last year. There was also a call for support and new committee members for the PTSA. So I want to make sure to put that out there. If you're wondering what to do with your extra time, that's a great place to put it.
Second that. Angelina, anything? I know you were in attendance as well.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank our administrative team, which even after a busy week, continue to come and provide updates. I always want to thank the PTSA. They've been an outstanding partner. And I do appreciate, Zach, your attendance as well. I think it provides a broad perspective and another set of ears to listen to what the community wants and needs.
In the interest of board education, I will be buying myself a revised version of Robert's Rules, so we know about this in the future. Other committee updates.
No, but I do want to make maybe a suggestion as an outcome of this conversation. Perhaps there could be another line added to this board professional development, this just as a standing item, so that if somebody does do reading an article or something like that, it's just a placeholder and a reminder to say like, hey, I read something, I went something, we could add that.
And I don't think we need a vote on that, but I think it's a great idea to add that in the agenda of the future. And that is definitely encouragement to all board members to attend whatever you can attend and bring those lessons back to all of us. I think Zach, even you gave the refresher on what you learned in new member training at some point, which was always a reminder for the rest of us. All right, that takes us to section 6 of the agenda. There is action required there, so I need a motion to move 6.1 and 6.2 up for approval. Let's see, Jenna and Kevin. Any discussion or further explanation?
6.1, again, the Board of Education doesn't get the exact details, but you do get a student number just to get a sense of all the different meetings that are occurring on those dates that are listed above. And then 6.2 is an unusual agenda item. Miles Goss, who is a former director of special education, ran some pretty high-hitting meetings that required a level of expertise, pre-work, the meeting, and then the paperwork followed up during a time that we didn't have an interim director. So I'm very thankful for his continued dedication. And again, this was a request of our own staff. They felt very comfortable that that would allow for a continuum that would be in the best interest of our students and staff. And I thank him for his service.
All right. Any further discussion or questions? No? All right. All in favor, say aye. All right, that passes. Brings us to section 7, curriculum change requests. I believe that also does require board action, so need a motion to bring 7.1. All right, Tammy, John, I'm just calling your name. Any discussion here?
This is just part of our shared decision-making process through curriculum and assessment, where our staff members will bring particular item or courses that they want to see or changes to courses. And because we're such a small school district, they're often very niche-like. So for example, in this particular one, a former teacher wanted to teach astronomy, and the teacher that's taken their place thinks the curriculum needs to go in a different direction. So you'll see intro to chemistry. So just not any wholesale changes, just adjustments to the needs of the students and staff.
Any further discussion or questions? No? All in favor? Ayes have it. All right. Brings us to section 8, which is the superintendent's recommendations around personnel. Yeah, we'll bring 8.1 to 8.5 up for discussion. Jenna, Kevin, any discussion here?
They're pretty standard, but I do want to point out on item 8.3, it says resignation, but many retirements are on there. And as happy as I am for them, we're very sad. And I do want to particularly call out several of our dedicated staff members. Judy Anderson is a teaching assistant at the elementary school. Michelle Johnston is a teaching assistant here in the secondary school. Kate Cullen-Doyne is a teacher over at the elementary school. She currently does math AIS. Carol Crescetti, who's been our part-time nurse, she's been sharing a job for a while. Technically, she's resigning, but she's retiring. She was outstanding through COVID. And I just want to thank them all for their service. And, we're sad to see them go, but we're happy that they're able to move on to the next stage in their lives. Oh, Jean Gilchrist, I forgot. Jean is on the bottom. Jean is retiring. Jean, many of you know, you see her outside with the stop sign. Jean is actually going to be opening up a bookstore here in Brunswick with her husband. So we're really excited for her.
Can we give him a round of applause? Is that okay?
Yes, it is. I will say for those of you who have elementary school kids, seeing Mrs. Gilchrist every morning and providing the smile for your kids every day and having them set off on a good foot. Spoke to her already, but it made a big difference for all of us. So it will.
And all the help in the library. too.
Oh, I mean,
She was really incredible. Mackenzie and Carly both just adored her. So she will be really missed.
I will share, she's already spoken to Kelly and myself. She will be coming back in a volunteer capacity. We don't know what that'll look like, but she does want to stay connected to our school district. So we're really, really thankful for that. Hopefully we get her back on Grandparents' Day. She keeps everybody in line on that day.
all right. With that in mind, I will look for approval of 8.1 through 8.6. All in favor? All right, ayes have it. Okay, that brings us to business and finance recommendations 9.1. Actually, hold on.
Yeah, do you want to do 9.1 separate and then 9?
9.1. Let's do 9.2 through 9.6 first, and then we can go back to 9.1. If
Can I just
that's
mention
okay.
there's a typo on 9.6. That piece is correct, but in there it should say extra classroom corrective action plan instead of financial statements.
Right here?
So,
Yeah.
but the attachment's right and the heading is correct.
All right, so we'll make that change. Bring 9.2 to 9.6 with the change to 9.6 up for approval. So any motion for that? All right. Tammy and Jenna, any discussion?
I'll just make 2 notes. We are, and I refresh the,
Missing things.
okay,
All right, is it still 9.6 or do we have more?
We have more.
Okay,
sorry about that.
scratch that, not really 9.6. It's actually, oh, right, those ones.
Okay, so you've got 9.2 through 9.10.
9.2 through
And that
9.10.
includes a couple extra change orders that came through. Stephanie and I are both very happy with our construction management service in terms of managing and keeping the change orders low. They've been vetted. We're very, very comfortable with them. This is expected as you find new things. For example, one of the change orders that the board found was that they had to completely rewire all the electricity in the conduits underneath the turf field. It was unexpected the way it works. So little things will come up, and these are just some found things. In particular, this is electrical and plumbing mostly. So those are change orders.
Any questions or comments? All right. All in favor of approving 9.2 through 9.10? All right, the ayes have it. Brings us to 9.1, the BOE professional development. I need a motion to bring this up for discussion.
So this is just to clarify, an I is to make the change to make it be just
Once
mandatory
it's-
expenses.
Yes, once it's up for consideration.
clarify.
Yes, so to put it up for discussion, we'll make up names, Dina and Zach. Why not? Okay. So let's obviously have our discussion. So just to read it for the public, be it resolved, the Board of Education approves the removal of all BOE expenses, they're giving up on us, for 2026.
You guys picked the worst meeting to come to.
Hopefully you learned something.
I'm still gonna give them credit, right?
Extra.
Thank you, Mr. O.
Some action. All right. I do feel bad. But it's good. See, adults can have discussion.
Right.
Can't drive past 9.
We could disagree and still get along.
No punches thrown, civil, no swear words. All right. Well, I do swear. Be it resolved, the Board of Education approves the removal of all BOE expenses from the 2026-2027 budget, with the exception of mandatory training and memberships. Re-inclusion of other items will be dependent on future improvements to governmental funding should they occur. And I believe there was discussion of adding something along the lines of individual board members are encouraged to continue to seek professional development opportunities where available and feasible, and bring back any information learned from those opportunities back to the board for their own education. Something along those lines.
I'm
Someone
not
needs
an
to.
expert in Robert's rules, but I think you have to defeat that and propose a new
Correct.
resolution. If that's what you wanted to do. Otherwise, you just vote on that and move it along.
Well, could we vote on this the way it is and then
Revise it.
revise
after.
it?
I think we have to vote on it.
Yeah.
either way.
Yeah, we have to vote on it. It's
So,
an
but
action.
instead, I'm just like, so that we can come
So
up
we
with
vote
the
it down and then
proper,
you can add it.
so you can revise it.
If we voted down. we-
Vote it down as is, then we make a motion to revise it, then that revision's
Just
made, then we
revising
make
it
the
to
vote.
say-
Just revising it to say it's
We should do it if we can.
I mean, wordsmith
Vote on
that.
it as is and revise later. Is that
Sure, you can do
correct?
that as well.
We can
Either
revise
way.
next meeting if we want.
We could,
You don't have to vote it down to
Right.
we could vote, approve it contingent on elaborating on the, you can continue.
No, you just vote on it
You have to vote on it
We
as
vote on
as
it.
is.
And then if you want.
Under the assumption that further changes will be made as unofficially agreed by the board, something along those lines.
And we can revise it next meeting?
Correct.
We can revise it.
Starting out in finance as
So whether
suggested.
it's a yes or a no, it can still be revised.
Correct. Well said.
No, I
So I
don't
don't-
understand that. So if
Because if we vote it down, we can just bring it back the next meeting with the revisions, or we can vote it yes and revise it and bring it back next time. So it's somewhat of a meaningless vote, but I think it is still important.
I mean, the revision is really just for.
Clarity and yes, recognizing the collective views of the board. All right, with that wonderful introduction, any further discussion?
No, I just want to thank everybody for hearing me out. I appreciate it.
Yeah, agreed. And I really appreciate everybody weighing in on it. I know we feel strongly about this because we all care about this district. We want to do the best we can. That said, I really do think we should take some time to hash this out and reconsider how we're going to approach this.
Yep, yeah, that's a good point. That's probably, if you're voting it down, it's probably indicative of need for bigger changes than, voting to approve it. So with that, I do need a vote of all in favor of approving item 9.1. All right, so Tammy, Danielle, Jenna, myself, and Kevin, and Dina. Sorry, I didn't see your hand. It was like this. All right, all opposed? John and Zach. So that is, the yeas have it, that is approved. And again, we will bring this to the next Audit and Finance Committee, seek your opinion on the revisions that should be made, and we'll obviously bring that to the next board meeting. All right, that brings us to public comment. Sorry, kids, we lost all of you. Rules are up there.
That's my favorite part.
I know, it is. They ask good questions.
Can you send the kids?
Oh, we have someone.
Oh, Gianna.
Listen, Mr. O, if they were gonna ask a question, can you let us know?
Like, send him an email.
There was a couple of them we're good at.
Were they good ones?
I don't know what they are, I try to stay out of it, because I don't want it to look like I'm saying like, ask this.
They get the extra credit. It's minor.
Yeah, so the one kid I said, listen, I tell them they can leave at 9:00 if they have to, but I usually give them the signal, so I went, told them, and Adam looked at me and was like, I have a question, I was like, you're fine, you got 100.
Heard that.
Nothing after that.
they want to get those to me, I'm happy to get them
Yes.
to the board and, because I want them to know that their presence is appreciated, so.
I will tell them that.
And our appreciation for sitting through that long of a meeting.
Life is
Maureen.
difficult sometimes.
Yeah. Hi, I'm listening here at Tamarack. So going back to the numbers with sports, and I know in previous meetings you talked about the decrease in student interest levels. So other schools have club affiliations with certain sports, and I know that kind of indicts the idea of like getting our athletes to do multiple sports and being flexible going season to season. But what would be the harm in affiliating with a club to have athletes follow through with their sports and really grow interest in each sport?
Are you talking about intramurals?
Yeah.
So we did talk about that at our ad hoc meeting for the athletics and made a recommendation to the board to start modestly with a very small intramural budget for just the reason you just said.
Are you talking about like a relationship with Brunswick Bulldogs? Is that what you mean? Like an outside club?
The best example I can give you is like for volleyball, for example.
Yeah, you're right.
I have self-affiliated with other clubs and things like that to continue playing through intramurals. However, doing through that, I've known schools like Averill Park has affiliated with Crush. So their sports team is heavily affiliated with them to encourage the students to go through that club team and progress their skills and come back for the next season and maintain the interest all the way through.
So I happen to own a club team program for baseball. And I would think the biggest issue with that is how do you select the program, right? So it ends up being looked at almost like favoritism. So say we aligned with your volleyball club and you come in here and you're a fantastic volleyball player, but Sally Smith plays for a completely different volleyball club. And she comes in here and she doesn't get as much playing time. Sally Smith's mom's going to be in here and being like, the only reason that Gianna Shea gets to play so much is because she's aligned with this volleyball program and instead of the one that my kid plays for. The other part of that is it becomes cost prohibitive for some people. A lot of these club teams are very, very expensive. So I think kids come in and really would want to be a part of those programs, but their parents can't afford it. And then it does put them at a little bit of a disadvantage when they do get to the team aspect here at school, where if 10 of the kids on the volleyball team all came from that club and 2 kids did not because their parents couldn't afford it, it does put them at a little bit of a disadvantage. Whether it's an actual disadvantage or a perceived disadvantage, it kind of does. That's just my perception of it and my take on it. There have been, like I said, I own a baseball program. There have been several schools that have reached out to me to say, oh, can you help with a feeder program? It's very difficult to establish that feeder program relationship. Something like a Brunswick Bulldogs, that is a recreational program that has a lower entry cost in comparison to some of these club programs, I think might be a little bit different. You know, like Brunswick girls softball recreational program, Brunswick Bulldogs football, where they are a Brunswick program. It's a recreational program and the costs are low. But I think for like volleyball, it's really challenging. Volleyball, baseball, even softball too. It's really, really challenging, I think, to have like a designated program that you're affiliated with. Does that make sense? Okay.
And as a school, I think we have to be careful because I remember a few years ago, the Shen girls soccer team got into a lot of trouble because the coach was almost like, it was perceived that it was mandatory for them to
I mean, even here, we had a coach who was coaching for an outside program. There was no affiliation whatsoever. And several parents came forward upset that they thought because she coached at this outside program and also coached here, that preferential treatment was being given. Even though that was not the case, that's how parents and players perceived it.
But we're looking at everything. So hopefully the intramural program And then also, I think too, that some kids are choosing not to play in high school and they're sticking with these elite and travel teams, because they don't want to get hurt at the high school level because they feel they're getting more exposure with those teams. That's something that I thought about.
I think that's you, Mr. Hutter.
Oh.
Yeah.
I came here, I'm having a problem contacting the district for items. What I had tried was, the big hole on 351 that was there for several months. When they get done, they put up 2 bus stop signs. They put them both southbound. And then they went later and they put a sign in front of one of them. Now, the only thing worse than no signs for traffic is a bad sign. I sent in an email via the website to Director of Grounds. Probably my mistake. The last bus director was bus director and Director of Grounds. I didn't hear anything back. She contacted the wrong person. I just didn't hear anything back. Then I found elsewhere, there's a Director of Transportation. I may have the title wrong. I emailed him and didn't hear anything back. I don't think I should really come here and occupy your time. A relatively small matter. I do have certain people I can always bother in the school who know who to forward on, but I don't think I should contact them always, with items. What I had put in the email was one, probably the bus driver on that route. And he got back in, should have told him, these things don't make sense. I don't stop here. And 2, somebody put a sign in front of our sign, because those signs are only put up for us. And then contact DOT is like, I think they point them in the wrong direction. They just put them on the wrong side of the road. And if people don't, they know there's no bus stop there because there's no house for half a mile. So they don't take them seriously. So why even bother putting them up? So somehow, I don't know if we're being filtered out of the website or
I
what.
can follow up with our IT department. It's conceivable that it's in spam or something like that, but I can follow up to see. So now I know your email address, so I can work with them to see.
We'll possibly have a general contact on the website to one person who can put a subject in and they forward it on to the right person or decide it's spam. Because I think right now the only general contact is to mail you a letter, which is okay, but it does work. Thank you.
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
Oh, no.
No?
You want to-
Oh, right. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Do you need a motion for executive session to discuss a student issue? Yeah, that, all in favor?
5 minutes.
Well, yes, 5 minutes.
You mean after 3 hours? Okay. Kelly and Justin,